Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're taking a look at one of the most, well, honestly, one of the most culturally massive periods in modern history. But we're doing it through a totally unexpected lens. We're diving into some fascinating source material called Seeds of Awareness, the 60s Flame. Normally, when we talk about the 1960s, it's all about dates, politicians, and textbook historical events. But today, we're going on a journey that transforms this famous decade into a profound philosophical awakening. We're going to look at it not just as a timeline of events, but as a giant shift in human consciousness. If you've ever wondered why that specific decade felt so incredibly charged, you are absolutely going to love how we break this down. Okay, let's dive into this because this concept completely flips the paradigm. The source text introduces this incredible cosmic commentator named Zoran. Picture this figure perched on the ridge between worlds, wings catching the glow of a distant nebula. And Zoran offers us this sweeping universal perspective of the 1960s. He describes the entire era, the peace movement, the protests, the massive shifts in culture, as the universe exhaling after centuries of contraction. No way, right? Just imagine looking at an entire decade not as a series of random human choices, but as the Tao moving loudly, like a cosmic breath releasing tension that had literally been building up for hundreds of years. It's an incredibly powerful way to frame history. And that brings us to the core definition of what the 60s actually represented in this narrative. The source material argues that the 60s wasn't merely a point in time on a calendar. Instead, it was a turning of the human breath. For the narrator, who grew up right inside the shift, childhood had been a time of natural balance, completely untouched by polarity. But the 60s? The 60s were different. It became humanity's very first encounter with a collective yin and yang. It was the first time an entire generation sensed that humanity was wrestling with something ancient, deep, and totally unresolved. They were transitioning from innocent bliss to feeling the intense push and pull of a planetary polarity.
Now, this awakening builds across a human life, mirroring how society itself evolves. We start in childhood, which is all about that natural balance we just talked about, a time before the world's weight is truly felt. Then, boom, we hit the middle. The 60s representing polarity and awakening. This is the messy, loud adolescence of a generation. And finally, we move into adulthood, which is defined by the maturing dream. An entire generation essentially grew up inside this immense societal shift, so their own personal coming of age mirrored the cultural coming of age of the world around them.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to ground the narrative in the actual human experience. Before the awakening, there was just the simplicity of being a kid. We're talking about millions of baby boomers, all born into a world that was about to change way faster than anyone could possibly comprehend. Kids playing baseball, football, and basketball, riding their bikes until the streetlights came on, laughing, scraping their knees, dreaming of a better world. They were completely unaware of the massive polarity swing that was looming just over the horizon. That childhood innocence was literally just about to give way to the very first stirrings of awareness. As that innocence fades, Zoran offers a profound observation. Childhood is personal balance, but adolescence is where humans first feel the breath of the world itself. Man, that is such a resonant way to explain societal adolescence. When you are a child, your world is small, right? It's contained and it's balanced by the adults around you. But as this generation entered the 1960s, they weren't just experiencing personal puberty. They were feeling the breath, the friction, and the energy of the entire world waking up. They were feeling the collective pulse of humanity for the very first time. So how did that awakening manifest? Well, it was chaotic, it was messy, and it was deeply human. Millions of young people thought they could change the world. And honestly, they believed it with a sincerity that only the young can really muster. They marched in anti-war demonstrations, holding signs and singing songs, carrying a genuine spark in their hearts, a flame that essentially said, "We can do better than this." Looking impartially at historical events like the push to end the Vietnam War, the source notes that the shift didn't happen because of one single person. It happened because a collective mass refused to accept the narrative they were given, questioning authority and demanding answers. It was a beautiful, disruptive push for peace. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Zoran frames this exact burst of peace and protest. He doesn't just see it as a political movement, but as yang rising. In cosmic terms, yang is a period of pure expansion, idealism, and a forceful push toward unity. But here's the catch. Every single expansion inevitably carries its own contraction. The intense idealism of the peace bomb wasn't just a cultural phase, it was a universal law in motion. That massive push outward meant that a pull inward was absolutely guaranteed to follow. Which leads to a fascinating piece of wisdom from Zoran. He says, yin and yang do not take sides, they take turns.
This is such a crucial, impartial lens through which to view history. Zorn explains that the exact same decade that birthed this incredible push for peace and consciousness also birthed deep disillusionment. The same protests that awakened society also awakened fierce conflict. It wasn't about one side being entirely right and the other wrong in the eyes of the universe. It was simply the cosmic law of equilibrium playing out, expansion and contraction just taking their respective turns on the global stage.
And this brilliantly illustrates the fracture. This exact moment forced a generation to realize they were caught in polarity. The comforting childhood belief that adults had all the answers suddenly smashed into the reality of the 60s. Leaders acting from fear, institutions hiding corruption, and a nation preaching unity but actually practicing deep division. This was the fracture. This was the moment they saw the cracks in the world and realized that society was intensely polarized.
But the source text doesn't view that fracture as a tragedy. Instead, Zoran delivers this vital lesson. Awakening never arrives through comfort. It arrives through contradiction. You see, seeing the world break apart wasn't the end of the dream. Actually, it was the necessary seed for the world to truly wake up. It's the hidden equilibrium at play. Every societal collapse or moment of deep division carries within it the seed of renewal. The pain of seeing the contradiction was exactly what was required to force humanity to open its eyes. They saw the world fracture, yes, but in that fracture they also saw it dream. So what happens when that generation grows up? Let's fast forward a few decades. The baby boomers became parents. They built careers, paid mortgages, and watched their own children grow up in a world that looked very different from their 1960s utopia. But the dream didn't die. It just changed shape. The loud, shouting idealism of the 60s matured into a quiet, deep longing for consciousness. It transformed into a desire for a world where people truly understood themselves, understood each other, and respected the delicate balance that holds the whole thing together.
So the crucial point is summarized perfectly right here. The dream of the 60s was not a political movement. It was a breath, a collective inhale of possibility. All that marching, all that conflict, all that idealism, it wasn't just about passing laws or winning arguments. It was humanity taking a massive breath in. And as the narrator notes, they carried that breath into adulthood, even when they were busy paying bills and raising kids, even when they kind of forgot its name. The breath was still there, living quietly inside them.
This brings us from the history of a generation directly to you. When did your innocence first meet awareness? Think about your own life for a second. When was the first time you realized the world was not the simple, harmonious place you thought it was as a child? When did you first feel the breath of the world and realize things were complex, messy, and highly polarized?
To help you explore that, the source text leaves us with these reader's ledger prompts. I highly encourage you to reflect on these points. When did you realize the world's complexity? What idealism shaped your early years? What disillusionment followed? And more importantly, what hidden wisdom came from that disillusionment? And finally, what dream from your youth still lives quietly inside you today? As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. If every period of cultural contraction and division is simply the universe preparing to take another massive breath, what kind of world are we inhaling right now? Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible material. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.